Today's today is the 10th of Shvat, and what I'd like to do, because today is a very special day, because this is the day where the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson, ascended to the leadership of the Chabad Hasidus, and he was the seventh Rebbe. He became the seventh Rebbe on the 10th of Shvat, because he chose this day because it was the Yortzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And so what I want to do is all the teachings we do today will come from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, from the Rebbe himself, from Rebbe Schneerson. You want to say why do I want to teach it from the Rebbe? I mean, I'm not a chassid of Chabad. I admire them so greatly, but I would never be so bold as to call myself Chabad. You know, it's a great honor to be Chabad. I never call myself that. But the Rebbe, to me, is such an inspirational figure for so many reasons. Let me just list a few. First of all, he inspired so many people. He inspired so many people to commit to a life of serving the Jewish people. First and foremost, that shows the Rebbe's greatness. He was able to inspire so many people through his personal teachings, through his force of his personality, through his dedication, through his commitment. And so that is just an incredible achievement, and it's only growing. He's continuing to inspire hundreds and thousands of people to commit to a life of serving the Jewish people. Sometimes, unfortunately, you hear from other rabbis who are skeptical of Chabad. They feel like Chabad is encroaching on their territory. But my feeling is, if everybody was doing their job, then they wouldn't be upset about the success of Chabad. In fact, they would just encourage more. They would be happy for it. So first and foremost, I'm grateful for the Rebbe's inspiration to so many people. Also personally grateful for the Rebbe's teachings, which I find to be very inspirational. And also, I think the Rebbe's story himself personally is an incredibly inspirational story, that the Rebbe became the Rebbe at the age of 48. He became the Rebbe at the age of 48. And even though, if you speak to some Chabad Hasidim, they'll say, oh, he's destined from birth. It's not really clear to me that that's the case. The case is, there's three biographies about the Rebbe that I've read. I read the biography of Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, and Professor Samuel Heilman and Nachum Freeman. A lot of people who are involved in the world of Chabad love Telushkin and Steinsaltz's, but they call Heilman Freeman's the hatchetography, because it presents a little bit of a more academic, less hagiographical description of the Rebbe's life. But I actually think that the more I read Heilman's book, which talks about some of the more human aspects of the Rebbe, I find that to be even more inspirational. The fact that he was actually, in some ways, his path was not always clear. That when he came to America, he was working as an engineer in the Navy Yards. And he went from there at the age of 48 to ascending to this leadership. And the leadership, when he assumed the leadership of Chabad, there was a handful of people in his room, just a handful of people. And at that moment, he was able to turn it into this force of spiritual dynamism, which is an incredible, just an incredible achievement. And so that to me is incredibly inspiring. A lot of people go through what's called, midlife crisis, that you don't know what you're doing. Here he was assuming this role at the age of 48 and just accomplishing it with incredible vision. And that's another aspect I wanted to talk about, which is the Rebbe's just incredible vision. How many rabbis understood America like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who understood the importance of outreach before anybody else did? When he was doing it, people weren't aware this concept, even understanding the importance of speaking about God in the religious, in the public sphere, understood the importance of rescuing Jews who are in distress. The Rebbe's vision, his public vision, was incredible. Obviously, no man is perfect, but these are just some of the reasons why I admire the Rebbe so much. And so, therefore, I thought today we'll share some teachings from the Rebbe's Chumash, So, I'd like to start with, first of all, a couple of footnotes to what we discussed last discussion, which was we discussed two things that I want to highlight what the Rebbe said about them, which is why does it say Vahi Beshalach Pharaoh, and Pharaoh sent the people, and also the bones of Joseph. So I want to talk about, so the Rebbe's point here was that the Rebbe says the word Beshalach, why does it say that Pharaoh sent out the people? The Rebbe writes, it alludes to what the Jews accomplished. When their desire for design freedom became so intense, it caused Pharaoh himself to change from being the personification of evil to a force for holiness. So the Jews were able, when our ancestors desired freedom to such a degree, Pharaoh himself changed. Pharaoh himself changed from the personification of evil to a force for holiness. And Pharaoh not only allowed them to leave, but he actively sent them away. This, to me, shows the Rebbe's optimism, his belief in the possibilities for change, possibilities for good. Believe me, the Rebbe knew better than anybody about evil. The Rebbe, saw so many of his Hasidim killed and wiped out in World War II in Europe. That's why all of Chabad Hasidus was decimated. He had to rebuild it. But he still believed, one of the things, his characteristics is he was always optimistic. And the Rebbe believed that if we ourselves would have a desire for divine freedom that would be intense, we'd be able to cause others, even people like Pharaoh, to also change their ways. And then the Rebbe writes, this applies today as well. A relationship with God that is based solely on reason is limited in its intensity. We are called upon to go beyond reason and reach an appreciation of God that's beyond ourselves. And in this manner, it's possible to transform even Pharaoh. And here he takes Pharaoh to be spiritual Pharaoh, which is our sinful desires, and to transfer them into being aware and conscious of God. So that's the first thing I wanted to say is, how did the Rebbe interpret the verse that we took last session, which was talking about Vahi Beshalach Pharaoh, and turn it into basically the concept is that Pharaoh did send us away, but only because we desired our freedom so greatly. Then I wanted to talk about, and after this I'll pause for a moment, the bones of Joseph. We talked about the bones of Joseph and how Moshe Rabbeinu busied himself at the moment of the Exodus with the bones of Joseph. Now, this is interesting. I see your question, Howard. Let me just make this point about the bones of Joseph, and then we'll get back to you. But the point is that the Rebbe himself understood. The Rebbe himself understood or taught so much about the power of a relationship with the past. The Rebbe felt that way. The Rebbe used to visit, one of the few places the Rebbe left his home in 774 was to go to his father-in-law's grave to pray there. The Rebbe understood the importance of the relationship with the ancestors. One of the reasons why the Rebbe wanted the library of the Chabad Hasidim to be redeemed. Right now it's being held kidnapped by Putin in Russia, and Steve Lieberman is working very hard day and night, pro bono, to try and rescue that library, is because the Rebbe said that the souls of the ancestors are contained in those books. The souls of the ancestors are contained in the books. So the Rebbe understood the power of relationship with the past. So bones are not just bones. Bones represent the link to the past. So let us see what the Rebbe says about the bones of Joseph. This is what the Rebbe writes about the bones of Joseph. The Jewish people were about to embark on a journey through the desert, whose barrenness and perils were a reflection of its spiritual desolation. In order to be able to survive such a journey, Moshe ensured that they were accompanied by the essence and the spirit of Joseph, that they were prepared to transform even the bleakest landscape into a fitting home for the divinity. Meaning to say, as our ancestors were traveling through the wilderness, in order to transfer the wilderness from a place of desolation into a place of spirituality, we needed to be accompanied by the bones. The rest of the world sees bones and either tries to say they're not important, burn them into ashes, or else just discard them. But the Rebbe sees the bones as something that can accompany us on our journey and our efforts to try and transform some place into a place of spirituality. And then the Rebbe writes, in order for us to persevere through periods of desolation, we must take our cue from Joseph. We must strive to bring even the most distant and rebellious individuals back to the fold, showing that they are truly God's beloved children. And so that is basically what Joseph, this is, I guess, what Joseph did. I guess he sees this as Joseph forgave or took back his brothers. So maybe that's the reason why the Rebbe connects it to the bones of Joseph, that we always have to look for our brothers, and that's what Joseph was doing. But the basic idea is that life is a journey through the wilderness, and the way we can give meaning to it is by being accompanied on our journey by the bones of our ancestors. So those are the first two teachings I want to share from the Rebbe, and I want to now pause for a second because Howard has a comment.